September 8, 2016 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Ms. Walton, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zhang?
Here.
Mr. Pons?
Here.
Mayor Freiling?
Here.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here. On the agenda today, we have the council minutes of August 11th, 2016. Are there any edits, corrections?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the minutes as mailed.
Seconded.
Ms. Walton?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye. We have two matters of special privilege today. I will start with the first one. Just to let you know, you may have noticed on your way into the Stryker Center this afternoon that some of the sculptures from the Arts District have now found their home here in the Municipal Center. In particular, I'd like to point out the Lost Wax cast bronze work of local artist Mary Lee Cleveland, and it is known as Dawn, and it's sitting out here on what would be the southeast corner of the Stryker Center. This piece was inspired by references to Dawn in Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey, and it's meant to remind us that each new day brings new opportunities. And it's kind of fitting that the Odyssey is now connected to the Stryker Center, where our meetings are sometimes long, labyrinthine, and arduous as anything Odysseus faced. And just as the Odyssey was a sequel to the Iliad, this space is also the sequel to the former Stryker building. Ms. Cleveland is a graduate of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. She's worked in studios across the country and abroad. But as a teenager, Ms. Cleveland attended Lafayette High School, where she met her future husband. She's now returned to the greater Williamsburg area to continue her career, inspiring others with her work, and to start a family. We're glad to have you with us as part of our community. If you'd like to see more of Ms. Cleveland's work, please visit the Williamsburg Art Gallery in Merchant Square, where she is a resident artist. Ms. Cleveland, could you stand, please? Thank you. We have one other piece of art that's on this corner of the Stryker building, which would be the northeast corner, and that is entitled Up, Up, and Away, and it's by Jordan Para out of North Carolina. This piece is not owned by the city. It's currently on loan, so we'll see what its future holds. So that takes us to our second matter of special privilege, which is public comment on the 2017-18 goals, initiatives, and outcomes. And I do have one speaker's card, and after this speaker, we'll open it up to anybody who'd like to address council. If you could come forward and give us your name and address. And please limit your remarks to 5 minutes. Mr. Kirkland?
Ron Kirkland with the Williamsburg Hotel Motel Association. Mayor Freiling, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak today. As you begin the biennial process of developing your goals, initiatives, and outcomes, our members would like to ask that you take into consideration the issue of workforce housing. One of the new tasks that I find myself doing more frequently is that of human resources recruiter for our members. The reason is our lack of housing that housekeepers, guest services, and maintenance employees can reasonably afford. During some of the peak tourism periods, we find our members relying more and more on J-1 student visa resources to fill seasonal positions. The bigger problem is finding the core year-round employee that every hotelier relies on to take care of the guest. Finding a qualified person to accept a full-time year-round hospitality position that lives within 15 minutes of this building is a eureka moment, akin to James Marshall discovering gold in Sutter's Mill, California in 1849. What this has led to is three different outcomes that are not desirable. One, people resort to living in hotels, and nobody wants that. Two, people live outside of our community in Hampton Roads and ride the bus for hours every day, which, to put it bluntly, sucks. Through no fault of their own, many of these folks find themselves riding a bus for more hours a day than they get to spend helping their children with their homework. Nobody wants that. Three, people in New Kent, King William, Charles City, etc., commute 60 miles or more a day, and with the transportation issues that our area has, that presents its own set of unique problems that are undesirable. On a side note, 75% of the staff in my office falls into that category. Nobody wants that either. In closing, WHMA would very much like to work with council to help identify solutions to this problem. We're certain it extends beyond the hospitality industry and really needs to find its way near the top of your list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkland. I have one other speaker's card, Dr. John Whitley.
Mayor Freiling, members of the City Council, I'm John Whitley. I live at 110 Governor Berkeley Road. I have a question before I speak to the goals, initiatives, and outcomes. And if I were to speak to legislative priorities, is this the time to do that, or should I wait till open forum?
As long as you're here, Mr. Whitley, we're all ears.
Thank you so much, sir. Goals, initiatives. I petition City Council to support $15 as the minimum wage for the city as one of our goals, initiatives, and outcomes. For too long, we have been complicit in permitting workers to be denied affordable housing, decent transportation, health care, and many other expectations of employment by our supporting repressive and unjust wages. These workers make our economy viable and sustainable by providing the goods and services needed to engage and comfort our visitors, protect our environments, comfort our citizens. Fight for 15. Now I'd like to share with you a thought or two about legislative priorities. I petition City Council to include $15 as the minimum wage as one of our legislative priorities. I petition City Council to include Medicaid expansion as one of our legislative priorities. I petition City Council to repeal right to work legislation and to deny any attempts to make right to work an amendment to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia as two of our legislative priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitley. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time on the goals, initiatives, and outcomes? Seeing no one, we will move on to the public hearings. The first public hearing today is a long-term special event license agreement, request of Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for the operation of an ice rink on Duke of Gloucester Street, proposed resolution 16-14. As an employee of the foundation, I will refrain from discussing this matter or participating in any way, and I will hand the meeting over to Mr. Foster.
Mr. Collins, you have a report?
The Colonial Williamsburg Foundation has submitted an application for the issuance of a long-term special event license for the operation of an ice skating rink within the Duke of Gloucester Street right-of-way to the City Manager's Office, consistent with Section 9-41 and Section 9-44 of the City Code of Ordinances. The Colonial Williamsburg Foundation is sponsoring the operation of a 48 by 84 foot ice skating rink by Magic Ice USA. This is the same company that operated the rink last year with a similar ice skating surface. The installation beginning November 1st, 2016, and removal of the rink by February 28, 2017. The proposed location is consistent with the vicinity that it was last year, the same location within the right-of-way, the same block. The ice rink hours of operation are established in the request letter and resolution. The stated goal of Colonial Williamsburg Foundation continues to be to continue a special activity around Merchant Square shops and restaurants during January and February. Historically, this is a slower time for the merchants, and this is an activity that will bring guests and locals into Williamsburg to skate, dine, and shop. Staff did review the attached site plan and materials for consistency with City Code and found them to be consistent. There were no exceptional provisions this year. Much of it was the same as last year with the staff issues being addressed last year. The one primary difference this year is the 3-year request for the license. Last year it was 1 year to see how the operation went. The applicant has indicated that they are entering into an agreement with the service provider for a 3-year provision of service, and they're requesting the license to extend those 3 years as well. Staff is happy to answer any questions that council may have on this use. The applicant is also here to provide their report.
Questions for staff? Entertain commentary from the applicant, should they have any.
Robert Underwood with Colonial Williamsburg. Mr. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and City Council members. I want to thank you for considering our application for our license. We don't anticipate anything much different than what we experienced last year. We did change the operating hours from what we have learned. They're actually shorter in nature, and also included holiday coverage on special hour, and they're listed in the application letter. We are anticipating and are working on enhancing the aesthetics of the rink. It'll be similar in nature, but with a higher quality of display. So I just wanted to point that out.
Questions from Mr. Underwood?
No.
All right. With that,
Thank you.
That will open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak on this matter, now's the time. Seeing no mad rush, we'll close the public hearing, come back to council for discussion. Anybody?
Well, I just want to say that as someone who lives close by, I enjoyed walking up to Merchant Square and seeing people there in the evenings. The ice skating rink brought people not only to skate and to purchase, but also just to enjoy the ambiance. It was nice having the fireplace and the fire and the picnic table, and brought the community out in ways that we haven't seen before. So I think it's great for the area and for Williamsburg, particularly during that time period of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. No, I would agree. It's exciting to see Colonial Williamsburg trying these new things, and obviously this would be the second year. By all accounts, it was a success. Lots of participation. I think it was well received. I don't know that anybody got hurt too badly, if at all, out there ice skating. But it's this type of activity that is going to reinvigorate the product that Colonial Williamsburg offers to both the local residents, but more importantly to our visitors that come in. And so I think this is a good move for CW and a good move for the city of Williamsburg.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'm generally excited for this project to return, and especially for 3 years, and I'm happy to support this proposal. Just was pretty cool while I was still a student, where during the time when the ice rink operated, you had some students who, they're usually the same venues that everyone would go to, but this time I would ask someone and they would say, oh, we're going to go to the ice rink, we're going to go to Colonial Williamsburg, walk around, go ice skating. I thought that was really cool, especially bringing the college community and kind of going out towards the community, other than just a few restaurant bars that we usually go over the weekend. So I'm really excited to see where this goes on 3 years and then beyond that.
I did some informal polling of several business owners in that area, and they all seem to really enjoy that added energy to that block for the time it was open. At the time I was living within walking distance of Merchant Square, and I was there almost every evening. Sometimes later in the evening, it was nice to see people still out skating at the 9 o'clock hour. So it was an asset for the holiday season, and excited to see it continue. Have a motion?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I move the City Council approve the proposed resolution 16-14 and long-term special use, special event license agreement, and authorize the Vice Mayor to sign and approve the resolution and long-term special event license agreement between Colonial Williamsburg Foundation and the City of Williamsburg, providing for the installation and operation of an ice rink on Duke of Gloucester Street pursuant to the dates of the operation set in the license.
Seconded.
Ms. Walton, will you call the roll?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Abstain?
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
All right. That's all you.
Thank you. This takes us to our monthly financial statement. Mr. Collins, anything you'd like to highlight?
I'll try and be brief. I wanted to point out one thing. When looking at the room taxes and mill taxes, you will notice that they were down over the previous year, this year over last year. However, if you look back 13, 14, 15, the previous 3 years, and you think more of a linear progression, the amounts collected were higher than those past years. And so while I know there's been some talk about July being a down month, looking back over time and looking at a linear progression, that was an increase. The finance director and I are monitoring that closely. The overall deviation between budgeted revenue and collected revenue at this point is just a little off, and we're monitoring that closely, but it's well within reach with a good fall. So we'll keep an eye on it and keep you informed moving forward. And if you have any questions, Phil and I are both available to answer.
Thank you, sir. Takes us to the next item, which is the monthly departmental operating reports.
Staff is available if you have any questions for the data you saw in the reports.
Seeing no questions, we'll move right along. It takes us to city manager reports. And the first of these is the legislative agenda development for the 2017 General Assembly.
So this month, we're really in the second step of the development of a legislative agenda. Last month, the city attorney presented the report on the previous legislative session and what happened and what the city needs to do to respond to it, what was and was not able to be accomplished. This month is again putting out the notice, if you will, to the public and to council to start thinking about what issues we want to address moving forward. And so provided in your packets was last year's agenda, the last year's Regional Planning District Commission agenda, and Transportation Planning Organization legislative packet. The assistant manager and I both attended a regional legislative issue work session with legislative delegation members from the Hampton Roads region at the PDC, and those bullet points of topics were also addressed. A couple issues at staff's awareness right now, excuse me, moving forward, deal with the shared economy issues such as short-term rentals or Airbnb issue. Another issue that we're dealing with right now deals with the licensing processes for group homes, both the timing and proximity to K-12 education facilities. And we'd be happy to take any further comments from council moving forward. So if other agenda items are at your attention, staff is accepting comments from individual council members now and for the next month. And that next month you'll see the draft legislative agenda before you for discussion in an open public meeting, and then you don't adopt until November. Of course, right now we're in a different situation where we actually do not have a senator, and the delegate is resigning also. So it's an interesting situation where we'll know our local delegation after this fall's election, and we'll arrange a meet and greet with council at that time as well. If you have any questions for staff at this point or thoughts, I'd be happy to take them.
Just a question in terms of process. Is there an opportunity for organizations around town, i.e. the college, the Williamsburg Foundation, or the Hotel Motel Association, to provide input or their suggestions into, outside of the public forum? Is there an opportunity for them to submit to council for consideration?
Thanks for bringing that forward. Staff will also reach out to our regional partners, including Colonial Williamsburg and the College of William and Mary, the school system, the Chamber and Tourism Alliance, Hotel Motel Association is another partner that regularly participates with us. And any other community organization that has an interest that the city would like to take is welcome to reach out to the city manager's office and provide that information over the next 2-3 weeks.
Thank you.
Are there any items currently on, or I should say, are there any items on the 2016 legislative agenda that are ready to move off? Or are they all still, from staff's perspective, valid at this point? And one in particular, I'll just mention, and I'm not saying we should take it off, but as Interstate 64, the project work is going forward, are we comfortable enough with where that stands, or does that still need to be on here, or should we talk more about the section between 234 and Bottoms Bridge?
I think the way it's currently worded right now is making the widening from Newport News to Richmond a top priority. I think given that funding can change or be redirected, even though it's been appropriated and committed, and until the widening is complete, I would retain that as a top priority on council's agenda for the next few years, at least, before we remove the Newport News to James City County portion.
It's really going to be probably 6 more years until it's complete.
Until it's built, keep it a priority.
Well, and I think another one is the Virginia Employment Commission services. I don't know if that's, an effort that's passed us, and having a local office is something that's even feasible. We had it last year, so something like that probably could fall off. Or, obviously, I think we all feel strongly that one should remain, but I don't know if there's any real opportunity for that to happen.
Thoughts?
I'm open to council's thoughts on that, and staff can provide a report next month on that issue specifically.
That would be helpful, yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Anything else on this topic? That takes us to the demolition of Super 8 Motel award of bid.
That'll be handled by Dan Clayton, Public Works Director.
Rearrange it here. Okay. Mayor and members of council, in anticipation of the purchase of the Super 8 Motel, we put together a bid package for the demolition of the building and the associated site restoration. We advertised the project on August the 6th and put the bid package online. We also contacted several who had bid on the demolition of the Cap Landing Road motels. An on-site pre-bid conference was held on August 15th, where we toured the building and grounds with several interested contractors. We took bids on August 25th and received 3 bids. Those are on the overhead there. Bids range from $312,000 to $345,000. Based on the tight range of these bids, we feel good that these bids are very reasonable. The low bidder is Waco. We checked references, several references, and they all came back very positive. In talking with Waco, they say the work should be done by the end of this year. There is some asbestos in the building, which will take time on the front end of the project, and that's what will cause it to go maybe 3 to 4, maybe 5 months long to get start the asbestos first, get that out, and then take the building down. And then finally, the site will be restored by removing all the asphalt, concrete, followed by grading, topsoiling, seeding, and mulching the site. Also, just want to mention the city's Economic Development Office applied for and was just approved for Virginia Brownsfield Assistance Fund grant of $50,000 to apply to the demolition project. With that, staff's ready to move forward with the project and looks to council for your action.
Questions?
Glad to see that building come down. Thank you for your work and Rich chasing down the grant. So.
No, I think that everything seems in order, and due diligence both in getting 3 bids that were very close together and references. So knock it down.
Ready to go.
Mr. Clayton, thank you. You mentioned asbestos, but it strikes me that the demolition of this building is, as I recall, significantly more expensive than demolishing the buildings over on Cap Landing Road. Is it just asbestos, or is it more to it?
It's just a little more to it. There's a little bit more asbestos is one of the reasons. I think the tight's kind of the site's a tight site for maneuverability, that kind of thing. Of course, there's a 3-story structure too. The other ones are just 1-story thing. So
yeah, and those make sense to me. So.
Yeah.
And congratulations on our Economic Development Office and Michelle for getting the $50,000. I think that helps a lot.
I want to pass along my congratulations to you staff and the Economic Development Office as well for that grant. And like everyone said, can't wait to see it come down. So.
I just want to point out, you've mentioned this, the tight range of the bidding.
Yeah.
Given what we see on some paving projects and other bids that we get where the range can be 35 to 40%, to have something where it's within 10% is really, is that unusual?
There's probably a little luck involved there, but it does show you they were all bidding the same thing. They knew what was in the building. They knew what they were up against. There were no. We met with them on site and explained exactly the limits of where we want to take the asphalt. So it was very well tied down, but it was glad to see those kind of bids. But sometimes on the asphalt or any other bids for that matter, it just depends on who really wants the job. There might be short on work or that kind of thing, so that we get a lot of discrepancy on some of the bidding.
And even though the site will be seeded and graded, there will still be some components of it that will remain asphalt for right-of-way?
The only piece of asphalt that will actually be on the property will be the piece next to the gas station. There's a driveway right there, and I think that access is pretty important to keep it because the other two driveways are really close to the intersection. So I think that driveway is used quite a bit. So we're not going to keep much. We're probably going to keep maybe about a 15, 20-foot strip along the property line there to get in and out of the gas station.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton, and thank you to Mr. Saunders and the Economic Development Office. We really appreciate your help. We have a motion?
I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Waco, Inc. for the demolition of the Super 8 Motel for $312,524.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Walton, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
This takes us to the next city manager report, Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission Service Agreement, amendments, proposed resolution 16-10 and proposed resolution 16-12.
Good afternoon, Mayor Freiling and members of council. The Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission operates the Merrimack Center located on Route 143 in James City County next to the regional jail. 18 localities in the 9th and 15th District Court Service units make up the commission that was started in 1994. The range of coverage for juvenile services of the 18 localities includes the historic Triangle and all the way over to Hanover, Caroline counties, and also the counties on the Middle Peninsula, Northern Neck, and Poquoson. The Commission's original service agreement from 1994 has never been amended. It provides for per diem charges to the member localities for juveniles that commit crimes in their jurisdictions. Proposed Resolution 1610 is an amendment to the service agreement, allowing the use of a rolling 5-year average of member utilization for purposes of budgeting. This is similar to the formula used by many other juvenile detention centers and jails, including our own regional jail. This change would greatly reduce uncertainty in any given year, especially for those members experiencing wide variations in detention center utilization. Once a budget is approved, members would know their assessments for the following year. Change would also help smooth locality costs and provide a more stable revenue stream to fund Merrimack Center operations. Monthly billings would also change to quarterly and simplify administrative procedures for Merrimack Center staff. The other resolution, proposed Resolution 1612, is also an amendment to the service agreement. This would allow the Commission to establish a separate maintenance and replacement fund, which would be shared equally among all 18 localities. This would provide another mechanism to accumulate funds and provide for equal sharing of costs for upkeep of the aging facility. All 18 localities are addressing this service agreement right now during September, and all must approve the change before it can take effect. And I know there are at least 5 localities that have already adopted. Like I said, all the other ones are going to their boards during the month of September.
Thank you, Mr. Sarah. Questions?
Sense.
In some ways, this is similar to what we did with the school system a few years ago with James City County, where we wanted to smooth out that the cost, and so it makes a lot of sense. It's also really encouraging that you can get 18 member localities to work together on one facility to serve the entire community, where if it was broken up into smaller chunks, the cost would be significantly more.
Absolutely.
So
assuming they all pass it.
Yeah, well, it's true. Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Move the City Council approve Resolutions 16-10 and 16-12, amending the service agreement for the Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission.
Seconded.
We have a motion in multiple seconds. Ms. Walton, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor
Aye.
Mayor Freiling.
Oh, aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
I answered pretty much anyway.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
This takes us to city attorney reports.
Each year, the city can issue through its Economic Development Authority up to $10 million of bonds. This year, the Williamsburg Landing has requested that the Williamsburg EDA issue those tax-exempt bonds in an amount up to $10 million for the addition of facilities to the landing. The EDA held its public hearing that it's required to hold and passed an inducement resolution in July. City Council is required to approve that, and so the resolution to do so is in front of you. If you have any questions regarding the project, representatives from the landing are here. Kevin White, who's bond counsel from Kaufman and Knowles, is also here if you have any questions. And so if it's desirous of council to approve those bonds, you would need to adopt the proposed resolution 1613.
Mr. White, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Sure, I'll just add a couple things. I'm Kevin White from Kaufman and Knowles, and with me is Ben Puckett, the Chief Operating Officer of Williamsburg Landing. Williamsburg Landing is a 501c3 continuing care retirement community located in James City County. It has issued tax-exempt bonds through the Williamsburg EDA in the past. To clarify, the bonds issued through an EDA like this are merely conduit obligations of the EDA, and there's no liability of the city or the EDA itself. The EDA is used as a conduit to the tax-exempt bond market for 501c3 organizations that can borrow through that market. And at the end of the day, really the agreement, all the financial covenants and so forth flow from the borrower, which is our client, to the bank, which will buy the bonds, in this case M&T Bank. And the proceeds of this bond will be, there'll be some other bonds issued by other jurisdictions that have BQ capacity. But those bonds, the proceeds of them will be pooled together to pay for a expanded memory care, assisted living, and rehabilitation units at Williamsburg Landing.
I would also note that because the facility is located in James City County also has to approve this transaction, and so they're scheduled to consider that matter on September the 13th.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
This doesn't inhibit anything we may want to do in the next calendar year.
Not that I'm aware, no.
The finance director and I both reviewed, and there's no lending that the city anticipates within the remainder of this calendar year.
And in particular, the lending that this program would apply to.
Correct.
Just to be clear, so it's a calendar year renewal, so come January 1st, the city will have
Yes.
the opportunity to made available to it to use these funds again. Okay.
Correct.
Mr. Zhang? And realistically, there are very few entities within the city that have the opportunity to take advantage of this. Since Williamsburg Landing is a valued community partner and I think an asset to all of our residents, I know many city residents who graduated to their ranks in the past several years, so their ability, particularly the needs in this community for additional memory care space, are important. To me, it doesn't affect anything that the city or the EDA would want to accomplish in the next several months, so it seems like an easy answer.
I would be certainly glad to be able to offer them, and if it helps them. So.
City Council adopt proposed resolution 16-13.
Second.
Ms. Walton?
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Freiling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Shelton, coming back to you.
So this is the first of a couple of code amendments that you're going to see as a result of the General Assembly's action, and it's to clarify and adopt changes to the tax exemption ordinance for the city. The first is to clarify that the designation of killed in action for purposes of a spouse who was killed in action and thus qualifies the spouse for the tax exemption includes the classification died of wounds received in action, and also provides the change that in addition to the single-family dwelling or dwelling on the property and 1 acre of land, also a garage or a shed that is used for the storage of household goods is also tax exempt for purposes of the ordinance. And so staff recommends that council adopt proposed ordinance 1613.
Thank you. Questions from Ms. Shelton? And even though this is a staff recommendation, council really has no choice.
That's correct.
Thank you. It's always good to know.
Mr. Mayor, I move the City Council adopt proposed ordinance number 16-13.
Second.
Ms. Walton?
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Freiling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
This takes us to unfinished business. This takes us to new business. First on the list is appointments to boards and commissions.
Mr. Mayor, I move effective immediately City Council appoint Andrew Trivett to the Colonial Community Criminal Justice Board for a 4-year term to expire September 30th, 2020.
Seconded.
Ms. Walton?
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Freiling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
It's not on the agenda, but also under new business. If Mr. Collins and Ms. Shelton would be kind enough to give us an update on the recent efforts related to the property at 101 Woodmere.
Well, I'm going to handle what the city's legal position is, and then I'm going to let Mr. Collins talk about what's happened so far. A number of years ago now, the state code was changed and required the city to treat group homes housing 8 or fewer individuals as a single-family use for purposes of our zoning ordinance. The code also provides that the city is not entitled to impose any condition that's more restrictive than those imposed on residences occupied by persons related by blood, marriage, or adoption on the facility, as long as it complies with that occupancy limit. Residential facilities means group homes or other facilities that are licensed by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. They are the sole licensing agency in the state. This effectively preempts the city from adopting regulations related to group homes that are not otherwise consistent with what the state provides. The licensing provision is entirely handled by the Commonwealth and the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. There is no role in that process for the city of Williamsburg. There is no option, alternative, or opportunity for the city to be involved in that licensing process. The applicant is not required to provide notice to the jurisdiction. They are required to designate a community liaison for the purpose of communicating with localities, neighborhoods, etc., but there's no express provision that requires them to provide notice to the locality or anyone else regarding what their licensing application provides or their plans with respect to the facility. So effectively, that means that the locality doesn't have any role to play with respect to the siting or the licensure of a group home in a single-family residence in the city of Williamsburg. There are some limitations that the Department of Behavioral Health and their licensing provision provides with respect to the physical facilities, but those are not significant requirements because these are not considered institutional uses. These are considered single-family uses. So they're pretty de minimis, things like having smoke detectors and a limited amount of square footage for individual bedrooms or shared bedrooms and a particular number of bathrooms per resident that lives in the dwelling. They aren't required to provide extensive sprinkler system or fire systems or things like that that would be required of institutional facilities that had more than 8 residents. The group home that is currently being proposed and located in the city of Williamsburg was created through a contract with the Newport News Hampton CSB. They are serving as the fiscal agent for the facility, and they entered into a contract with a private service provider to establish these facilities. While they are authorized to open facilities in their own service district, there is nothing in the code that prohibits them from contracting with a private service provider to open a facility that they then contract to use. The facility that they're proposing is a regional facility, but even if it weren't, there isn't any provision that would prohibit a private operator from opening a facility and then contracting with whichever CSB or behavioral health authority needed to use their services. And so that is the legal position as we understand it at this time based on what we know.
Questions?
Summary.
In terms of occupancy, can the city inspect for occupancy?
This is not a rental inspection. Unless we have noticed that there's a zoning violation and we proceed to obtain a search warrant as a result of a zoning violation, then no. The behavioral health does do inspections of the facility from time to time.
But what allows them, one of the things that allows them to do this is they maintain an occupancy below 8.
That's right.
So,
and they're licensed for only 8. So if they allow occupancy in excess of 8, they would be in violation of their license.
8 residents plus any additional staff. It's our understanding that there'd be at a minimum of 2 staff 24/7 at the facility.
That additional 2 is nothing, I mean, we welcome that.
quite an extensive use.
So, simply put, there is nothing, we have no standing to do anything about this.
That's correct.
Mr. Collins, you want to give a little review of some of your recent efforts and communications on this topic?
Okay. I'd just like to go through a timeline so that the public understands, I guess, when the city became aware of the issue and what we've done since then, with the caveat that the city has no role to play in this process. City council has no approval process in this. It's not subject to our requirements. One of the questions I've received, a 3-4 person rule, not subject to that. This is an area where the state preempts local government. So while we are trying to assert ourselves and find out information on behalf of city residents, this is really an issue of citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia and how they interact with their state government as opposed to the city government. And that's a hard split to make at times for the public. And so we're the level of government closest to the public and therefore the one they're most comfortable and most likely to come and inquire. But as we go through this process, I hope that the public sees that sometimes even the local government is left in the dark by the state and its activities. So on August 2nd, the Human Services Director received the first notice that the city received that there was any use happening at 101 Woodmere. And that was an email from the Colonial Behavioral Health District Director, David Coe. And David Coe, the Colonial Behavioral Health Director, had found out from Gateway, the applicant. And Gateway requested to have a meeting with Colonial Behavioral Health staff on August 16th. And so David reached out to both James City County staff and city staff at that time and asked if we would like to attend that meeting. So on behalf of the city, we had staff from Human Services, Police Department, Fire Department, and Planning and Zoning staff attending as well in codes compliance. James City County sent a light group of staff to learn about a similar home being placed in their jurisdiction. At that meeting, staff started to have concerns about the nature of the residents of the group home and that there was not clear information provided. So city staff reached back out to state staff to request email and phone response, and the state was not immediately responsive. One of the things staff had learned at the August 16th meeting was that the applicant anticipated receiving a license the first week of September. So we were very time constrained due to this short notice that the city had received. At that point, I drafted a letter that's been picked up publicly to the commissioner in charge of the department in charge of licensing. That office did respond within 5 days of me drafting the letter and provided a response to one of the questions that was raised by the city. In addition to the additional publicity from the issue, the Gateway applicant reached out to the city and met with Chris and I and the Human Services Director this morning in an attempt to further explain the use of the property. Not much really changed in that. There was a little more clarification regarding the ability to place a person who might have committed some form of sex act in the past. There was concern because there's no requirement under the state licensing procedure that would prohibit that. And it was explained both in the letter from the state and by the applicant today that the applicant's application and their policies are incorporated into the state license. And the Gateway policy, as stated by the applicant in our meeting today, is that they do not accept people who have committed sex act. And therefore, that would be incorporated into the license, and people that are dealing with that issue would not be on the property. We have not seen the application, nor has, to our knowledge, a physical license been produced to be able to show that yet. But that's what's been communicated by both the state and the applicant as to be the case on this property. Shortly after the August 16th meeting, the Homeowners Association in the Woods noticed people coming and going from the house, and they reached out to the city to see what was going on in the property. Staff had just returned from the meeting and learned about it, so we immediately set a meeting with the homeowners president, and I met with him that Friday and reviewed what we knew to that point, and we've been in constant contact with that homeowners association since. Additional homeowners association and the Walsingham School both became aware. We met with Walsingham this morning also and talked through where our understanding of the issue is to this date. The mayor and I met with a couple other HOA members yesterday afternoon and gave our update where we knew on this matter as well. The underlying issue is that the city does not, and city staff do not have the background and application materials to provide answers to the public. It's a state licensed and administered process. There are arms of the state, their community service boards provide mental health services within districts across the state. They administer the fiscal grant for services. And Gateway, the group home provider, is by that an extension of the state. They're contracted with the state to provide this service. And so it's incumbent upon the state, its service boards, and its applicant provider to inform the public. It's our understanding, just as there is no process to notify local government, there's also no process within the state process to notify neighboring property owners or homeowners associations. And so we have reached out and encouraged Gateway and the service board this morning in our meeting to facilitate communication with the public and to be responsive to the phone calls and emails received from the state residents. And with that, I'd be happy to take any additional questions council may have or elaborate further.
Explanation. Thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you for all you.
So next step, clearly there's nothing we can do to intercept or inject ourselves into this process today. This is a legislative agenda piece that perhaps we can go include into our legislative agenda moving forward, that maybe the state can develop some stricter guidelines as to the placement of these types of facilities.
Staff has two recommendations at this point, and we'll draft the formal wording of those recommendations. One deals with the notification process in advance. The further out that the applicant and the state can notify that this potential use is going to be located within a jurisdiction, the greater time that jurisdiction has to prepare to identify its services that are going to be needed to complement such a use of property. Human services are an example. Our fire department if there's a medical issue, a police department if there's some other keeping of the peace issue. Much like any residential property, is going to generate use. It does, by its nature, have the ability to create a higher use than a typical residence. But if I'm having a mental health crisis myself, I too could create that service need in the city. And so it's a residential use, and we don't discriminate upon our fellow citizens because of their medical condition. However, if in this case with a state license, there is the ability to notify the public. There is an ability to notify property owners. There is an ability to notify local governments so that people can prepare and accommodate that use within their community. That's not the case under state law now. The second opportunity that staff views at this time deals with the nature of the residents and the proximity to a K-12 school. We want the ability for both our youth and residents, as well as the residents of the group home and patients themselves, to be in the best opportunity for success by design. And so if we're able to separate those uses to where they don't come in conflict readily, then that gives both user groups the ability to have a peaceful, safe existence and be able to have a safe learning environment, as well as a safe place to recover from whatever medical condition that someone is facing. When we overlap those two pedestrian circles, as is allowed now under state law, it does raise the potential that there's less room for human error by design. And if we have the opportunity to design something or to lessen that chance of human error, then shouldn't we take an opportunity to do that? So those are the two staff focuses right now, looking at legislative agenda items to recommend to the state, reflecting on their existing process.
And I appreciate those comments, because any objection that any one of us in the community have to this group home being here, it's not that we don't feel compassion for the individuals that be living here. I think it's incumbent upon all of us as citizens of the world to take care of those that need help, those that can't take care of themselves. So this isn't an effort to push people out or to reject people into our community. I think we welcome people of all race, creed, sexual orientation, mental stability, whatever the correct language is on that. I'm probably not too PC on a lot of things, but this is not an effort to prejudice upon anybody, but it's how do we create, what is the best environment, so that people can coexist in a healthy way. And I think you spoke to that very well.
So there's no requirement that this information be shared with the community, with the local government. And yet we all know that when there's a void of information, it gets filled. And it gets filled by people making assumptions. It gets filled by conjecture. It gets filled by, gosh, I heard this, and it's the worst thing I can imagine, so I'm going to share that with everybody. So it may not be a requirement, but it's much more constructive for a community and its residents to know the situation than to go around guessing at what it might be. And I know you can't do anything about it, we can't do anything about it, but I feel like we have a compelling case to make with our representatives in the General Assembly about we as a community need to now take care of this operation and all the people who live around it, and we have a better opportunity to prepare for that when we have good information up front. And the part that maybe bothers me the most is, okay, there's no requirement to give us advance notice, but once we found out about it, and the seeming reluctance to answer our questions, to me, is inexcusable. There might not be a requirement to notify, but there's got to be a requirement to answer once the question is raised. And I'm probably misstating that. But can you tell me, Michelle, you mentioned the requirement that a community liaison be appointed. Has that happened?
I don't have a copy of the license, so it would not have been a valid license. It would be an application violation if it was not. And
so it would be appointed in the license. So once we get a copy of the license, we will know that.
We're going to ask for a copy of everything at this point because I need to know who that is, as does Mr. Collins and Mr. Wallentish, because that person is, from here on out, also responsible to liaison with the community. It's not just a pre-application requirement. It's the person who's designated to do that.
That's an unenviable job right there. Can you tell me if either of you know anything about the target population of the residents? Are there different homes that are designed for different levels of intensity of service depending upon the population that's going to reside there?
Yes. The services that are provided may not be meaningfully different, but the individuals who are placed in the facility have a greater or lesser ability to live independently and with less structure.
This is a good example of where the applicant and the state have the technical knowledge, the knowledge of what's on the application, are responsible to talk with the Eastern State team about who's eligible for what kind of release and what continuum of care, and would be better suited at answering the community's questions about that than city staff that are going based on what the applicant has told us to date. Which is basically what we heard this morning. So we're at a disadvantage to be able to answer that clearly.
So we really don't know.
Generally, it's people being released to the care of the group home from Eastern State that are at a point in their personal treatment plan to receive that level of care as opposed to remaining within the Eastern State institution. If they fail to perform to the treatment and care at the group home, then they would have to evaluate and either be remanded back to some other form of institutional care or another facility that isn't designed to assist in rehabilitating. That's what was communicated today. I am by no means a mental health expert or clinician to be able to answer that question, but I don't want to avoid it and put the community at ease as if it was something else in the vacuum.
Is there any in the current guidelines on the placement or when sites are identified as potential locations for these homes, is there any regulation at the state level on, for example, you raised the issue of proximity to schools or anything site related?
They're going to evaluate the sites for the purpose for which they are being proposed to be used. There is no prohibition regarding their location in proximity to schools or daycare centers or other facilities.
So it's really about the structure that's going to be
It's about the usefulness and primarily size. If you're talking about 8 residents, you've got to have enough bedrooms to accommodate that number of residents. You have to have enough bathrooms. You have to have an adequate square footage based on their guidelines. And so looking at facilities, size is going to be an issue with that number of residents.
Follow-up question. You had mentioned the Hampton Newport News Behavioral Service Group. They're the ones that are placing the patients, or Gateway's placing the patients. What's the relationship with Eastern State, Hampton Newport News, and how did
The residents of the facility are Eastern State patients who are slated to be released from that facility or are eligible for release based on the discharge criteria. They may be from anywhere from Suffolk to Newport News to Williamsburg or James City County. The facility is available to behavioral health authorities or service boards who have clients that need that type of facility who are currently living at Eastern State and are eligible for discharge. So it is a regional facility. The grant that was provided by the state to fund this was designed to be a regional fund for purposes of opening these types of facilities. They just happened to be, they found space in the city for them.
And Hampton Newport News CSB, Community Service Board, is the fiscal agent for the 9-region mental health group that feeds in.
So it's not them taking their residents and displacing them into Williamsburg.
There could be some residents from Hampton, Newport News, Suffolk, but also from Williamsburg. So it's regional. It's who's ready to go into that facility at any particular time if there is a space available for them, and they're one of those members of that regional board.
And is Hampton Newport News the fiscal agent always, or just in? And
that might be a better Peter question than me. They are for purposes of administering this grant and this contract. Whether they are for other contracts, the impression that I got today from the meeting was yes, but that's not a question that I completely know the answer to.
Sure.
It's my understanding that Gateway is also renting a home in Westmoreland of James City County. Do you know that?
Yes.
And Mr. Pons, thank you for your clarification on the concerns, the focus of the concerns that council has in this regard. As Mr. Collins has said many, many times, everybody needs a place to live. It's just, we want to try to make the best of the situation, and when we don't get that opportunity, it's frustrating. Anything else you'd like to add? Okay, thank you very much for all of your effort. Mr. Collins, I'm imagining this has been one of the top focus points of your time over the last couple of weeks. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. This takes us to open forum. If there's anybody who would like to address council on any matter, please come forward, state your name and address, and if you could limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, we would appreciate that. Seeing no takers, last call. Oh, we do have one.
My name is Mary Ann Dallas, and I live at 100 Yorkshire Drive, and I would particularly like to thank Mr. Collins for all the time he has spent on this. The piece of the puzzle that seems to be missing is, where is the state's concern for the children involved here? Walsingham has preschoolers ages 3 and 4, not just kindergarten through 12th grade. And literally, it is as close as you walking from the entrance, going over to mail a letter at the post office. That's how close to Walsingham this house is. So I really appreciate your efforts from the city to make the point that it comes across with the lack of information from the state as a there's a void of information, and it appears like the state isn't also, it has a lot of concerns for mental health patients, which I think is commendable and very important. But I think the proximity to the school is a real issue also. So thank you for helping us get information and figure out that piece of the puzzle too. What are they thinking when it can be that close to the schools. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dallas. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, council members, I would like to echo that same thank you. The city, our
Sister,
city.
would you mind?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Sister Mary Jean from Walsingham Academy. I have to say that certainly Mr. Collins and certainly a friend over here gave us ample time this morning to answer any of our questions, but the work that they have been doing, and when you ask the question, have they been totally involved in this I know they have been. And so on behalf of the school, I thank them. I totally agree with you. We need a place for everyone to live. But our questions were just, we needed, when the void was there, we needed questions answered, and we thank them for all that they have done. And thank you as a city council as well. So thank you.
Thank you, sister. Anybody else? Okay, that concludes our open forum. Do we have any items for closed session?
Not to my knowledge.
Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Walton? I was very tempted to call you Ms. Scott.
Touche. Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Freiling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
We are adjourned.